Item 47. Principal makes oath that at no time has respondent denied that she committed perjury in her initial affidavits. Indeed, at the time she was quite pleased with herself and proud of herself for being able to have my bank accounts closed and casting me into poverty, as her comment, "Perjury is a negotiating tactic," stands as testimony. You, the jury, have the task to determine whether perjury is a, quote, negotiating tactic, unquote, or whether it is a crime in accordance with, quote, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour, unquote. Not something that I wrote, not something that I made up. And surely your husband is your neighbour, right? If you, the jury, decide that perjury is a crime, then you have no choice but to ratify the default judgment for the respondent of being guilty of perjury, and you have no choice to remedy all the other follow-on crimes. Your decision, the decision you must make, is perjury a crime? That's the decision. If you make the decision that perjury is a crime, then all the consequences of that crime must be remedied, and you don't have a choice of remedying the consequences of those crimes. Okay? So the only choice you get, you the jury, is the choice of, is perjury a crime? Did Jennifer commit it? And it's clear she committed it. The evidence is mountainous and irrefutable, and therefore she would have to make remedy for all the other crimes. So that's your decision. Is perjury a crime? It is up to you, the jury, to decide if women are equal before the law, and if the law includes perjury still being a crime, and if that law includes perjury still being a crime for both men and women. If you find unanimously, all 12 of you, that perjury is not a crime for women, then it can also not be a crime for men under, quote, equality before the law is paramount, end quote. So you have now before you the situation of deciding whether unanimously Jennifer committed the crime of perjury, and is that a crime? Is perjury a crime? It's the first question, and second question is, did Jennifer commit it? Item 48. Principal makes oath that based on all the above evidence, plus a great deal more evidence which could be presented if you wanted, principal formally and irrevocably accuses the respondent of 5 crimes. Crime number 1. One account of common law theft for the removal of funds from the Instant Business Intelligence bank account, the amount being €18,000. 2. 2 counts of kidnapping the children of the principal, 1 count per child. Remember, the kidnapping happened in February 2008. My disowning of my former children was my protest at my former children being kidnapped. Okay? So the kidnapping occurred when the children were considered my children and the paternity test had been denied. And Jennifer had warning of that kidnapping. 3. 1 count of extortion by way of demanding money with menaces, that being I was threatened with incarceration from the Irish Family Law Courts via my lawyer, Pierce Neary, if I did not pay the extortion money being demanded by Judge Griffin. This was at the behest of Jennifer, which makes her accountable and responsible for that crime. 4. 2 counts of perjury for knowingly making false statements under oath. The 2 counts that I could prove very easily were that the bank in Jersey, I did not unilaterally withdraw €10,000. It was sent as a banking error, and Jennifer was aware of that error. Further, that was not spent on myself. It was spent to the benefit of the family. which I have not proven, but that is what it was spent on, under oath. The second one is quite simple. She slandered me and claimed that I had terminated the direct debits from the joint account, and I included into evidence a letter from Terry McGeary saying that Jennifer went sometime previously and the direct debits were cancelled because there wasn't enough money to pay for them. Okay? And then I was informed after the fact. In dealing with a woman in a court, or anyone in a court, it is only required to prove perjury once. That after you prove perjury once, all testimony of the perjurer is stricken and must be accompanied by evidence. Testimony of somebody who has committed perjury is worthless. Okay? Testimony of somebody who has committed perjury is worthless. She must deliver proof. 5. Receipt of stolen property, namely the proceeds of my 25 years of labour being the proceeds of my house. Okay? She knows that was a crime. As I pointed out, the default judgment for Louise Henderson was handed to Jennifer on her way into the court meeting. So Jennifer was served by me the default judgment for Louise Henderson, which said Louise Henderson had no right to retain my property. Okay? So Jennifer was served in the public by me the document that proved that I owned the property and that David Dunkley nor Louise Henderson had any authority over my property. So she knew she was the recipient of stolen property, namely the proceeds of my 25 years of labour. She is guilty of that crime. Okay? Further, since respondent has been accused of these crimes and accepted her guilt by way of non-response, principal claims that respondent has already accepted her guilt as accused. Principal petitions a jury to review all materials presented and to ratify the already accepted guilty verdict for the crimes that respondent has failed to deny. You, the jury, are reminded that the Notice of Crimes Committed 02, which was provided to you as an attachment called 09 Notice of Crimes Committed 02 Public, has already established under common law the guilt of the respondent. Okay? You, the jury, are reminded that the guilt of the respondent has been established. The only thing that you may question has been established is the receipt of stolen property. The other four has been established by default judgment. Okay? If Jennifer does not deny the receipt of stolen property, she is admitting her guilt for that as well. You, the jury, are not being asked to make a guilty or not guilty verdict of these 5 crimes. You are being asked if you will ratify the already accepted guilty judgment. If you are not willing to ratify this verdict, then you must explain that to your fellow jury members and make your case. You may invite witnesses to make statements to the court or to answer any questions you have so as to clarify your understanding of the situation. Now, for this last component, I'm going to provide testimony to the public and to the jury on the character of Jennifer Marguerite Toal as her former husband of 18 years and knowing her for 23 years. Knowing her, being with her for 23 years and knowing her for 32 years. Okay, so I knew this woman since I was 12 years old. We dated from when I was 20 years old, and I was with this woman for 23 years and knew her for 32 years. So when people say to me, oh, you should have known her better before you married her, the point is that these women turn to nasty, evil bitches after the children are born, because they know that the family law is there to screw the man over. It is a vastly, not just unfair and biased, it is a vastly criminal cartel that allows women to commit crimes with impunity, and they know it. Which is why so many women in Australia do turn into, quote, bitch from hell, unquote, after the children are born. And this is a very common experience of men in Australia. It is because the women know for sure and for certain they can steal the children and the house and the cars and the cash and everything else that goes along with it, and criminally abuse the man to their heart's content, and nobody will ever hold them to account for it. That's why they do it. So you, the jury, are being asked to put an end to this process. Okay? That's what you're being asked to do. You're being asked whether you are going to treat women as equal before the law or not. You're being asked in the full view of the public, and the full view of the public and men in Australia will look at your decision, and then they will decide for themselves how they're going to act. You are setting the precedent. That's what this jury is about. Now this section puts into the public record and presents to you, the jury, specific examples of the character of Jennifer Marguerite Toal chose to develop after the birth of her third child. Now I want to make the point here that Jennifer presented herself very well before the birth of her third child. Remember, we went to Bible studies together. She professed Christianity. We were married in the church across the road from her house, where I had gone to Bible study as a teenager. Okay? She professed her Christianity loud, proud, and long. Okay? Her behavior deteriorated severely after the birth of her third child, and deteriorated even more after the birth of her fourth child. These are the children whom she makes the unproven claim that are my former children, known by the callings of Joshua John and Josephine Marguerite. Jennifer even renounced her religion right after the baptism of Joshua John and said, quote, "I don't need stupid Christians to tell me how to live my life," unquote. I think she did. Item 48. Okay, so this is a series of comments I'm making about life as the husband of Jennifer Marguerite Toal. Item 48. Principal makes oath that in the summer of 91-2, when Jennifer's third child was still in a pram, I did the annual check of our rooftop in January. Our rooftop was aluminium panels, and each year I had to check all the nails holding down the roof to see if they had come loose and needed to be rehammered or resealed. This was done to prevent water damage to the timbers in the roof cavity. This was done in January in preparation for the January thunderstorms and heavy rain that often comes to Sydney in January. On the day it was about 40 degrees Celsius, and I was on the roof for a total of about 10 hours. It was very hot and hard work, as any man on this jury will know. At lunchtime I called down to Jennifer to ask her to please make me some sandwiches for lunch, so I did not have to take too long away from the task at hand. Her response was, quote, "Near enough, as I can remember. Maybe not exactly. You know how to make your own sandwiches, so you can make them yourself," unquote. That's what she said to me. I was disappointed in her response, so I went down and I explained to her that yes, I well knew how to make sandwiches, but she had no idea how to go about checking every single nail in the roof and making sure it was watertight so as to ensure no damage occurred to our house. I explained to her that since she did not know how to do the job I was doing, perhaps she would like to do the job that she knew how to do, so as to allow me to do the job she didn't know how to do. When even a man labours under the hot sun for 10 hours baking on an aluminium roof, Jennifer is the sort of woman who could not even be bothered to make me a sandwich to save me some time, let alone give my body nourishment so I could keep working. Though, to be fair, I will say under oath, she did eventually make the sandwiches, right? Now contrast that with my mother and grandmothers. When I was a child, when the men laboured, the women used to make sure they had enough food and drink to keep them labouring, and the women constantly praised the men for being able to do things that the women were not able to do. Moral of that story is, it costs nothing to be nice when someone is labouring for your benefit. Item 49. Principal makes oath that in about 1993, not long after buying the house in 8 Schofield Parade and before I left IBM in June 94, I slept 2 discs in my back. I believe this was the time frame because during this period Jennifer crashed my IBM car. I was heavily medicated for the pain of the slipped disc, and to even go to the toilet I had to crawl on the floor on my hands and knees, being completely unable to stand the pain of standing upright. You heard that correctly. When I went to the toilet, I had to crawl on the floor. I couldn't stand up. Those men who have ever slipped discs will have an idea what I'm talking about. As I slowly came out of the effect of the painkillers, I was hungry and thirsty, so I asked Jennifer if she would bring me something to eat and drink. Please bring me something to eat and drink. Her reply was, and I can recall this exactly, because I was shocked to the core. Quote, "Why should I bring you food and drink? What am I, your slave?" End quote. So through the drugs, I explained to her, "No, you are not my slave, you are my wife. You made a vow to love and honour me. Right now I am injured and I am in need of your help. The reason you should bring me food and drink is because you love me and I am injured and I need your help. That is why you should bring me food and drink." End quote. To even have to explain this to your wife was unbelievable to me. Later on, I recounted to Jennifer how when I was 14, my father suffered an injury to his back. He was in terrible pain and in screaming agony for a week. My mother never left his side apart from the obvious necessities. She nursed him for 2 weeks with hot packs to his back and cold packs to his head, as he was running fevers and was delirious from the morphine, which is the best they could do for him back then. My 2 brothers and I were cared for by our aunties. Our aunties came with meals and cooked and cleaned and made sure we were taken care of. The extended family pulled together when the head of the household was injured and in need of help through no fault of his own. When I explained to my wife that this is how my mother treated my father and that I expected similar of her, and indeed that is how I would treat her if the roles were reversed, her comments were along the lines of, quote, "You put women on a pedestal, they are not all like your mother, you know." End quote. Jennifer is a woman who initially refused to even bring food and drink to her injured husband. This was considered normal for her. Okay? And I will give you another example of that. Item 50. Principal makes oath that on or about Christmas 94, we went to Wagga Wagga for our usual Christmas holidays. During these holidays, I was taken ill with suspected meningitis. The doctor advised me to get a lumbar puncture as a precautionary test to determine if I had meningitis or not. The doctor said he did not believe I had meningitis, but the fact that I had been in contact with a known meningitis sufferer at the approximate time of the incubation period swayed him to err on the side of caution. Fair enough. A cousin of mine had meningitis and I'd seen him a couple of weeks earlier. He had developed meningitis and I'd seen him when he would have been infectious. The jury will be aware that meningitis can kill a man in under 48 hours if not properly diagnosed and treated. As the doctor joked, "If you die and I did not advise a lumbar puncture, the paperwork would be terrible, so best we do this thing, eh?" And I took his advice. Now it was actually the night before Christmas. The nurse who did the lumbar puncture was incompetent. It was Christmas Eve and obviously it was amateur hour. She took 5 attempts to draw the spinal fluid. The result of her incompetence was that she left a hole in my spinal column. Spinal fluid leaked out of my spinal column and made its way up to my brain and inflamed my brain, causing massive migraines. I was so sick I could not stand. I was vomiting and had severe diarrhea. I did not know which end to point at the toilet, quite literally. To even get a night's sleep, I was taken to the hospital and given pethidine, a very strong painkiller, stronger than morphine, similar to heroin. And I can tell you I wanted more of that the next day when I woke up in pain. After a CAT scan, the cause of the brain inflammation was discovered. I was advised I needed to go back into the hospital and I had to have blood taken from my arm and pumped into my back over the hole in my spinal column in an effort to create a blood clot over the hole in my spinal column. Remember, this was 4 days during which, or 5 days, I can't remember, during which I was in, it must have been 7 days, because it was the night before Christmas and the last day was the last day of the Melbourne Test match, Boxing Day Test match. So it must have been 7 days. I was advised I needed to go back into the, cover the blood clot over the hole in my spinal column. I was scheduled to be treated at 10 a.m. the next day when I was having the meeting with the doctor, not that I can remember much. So the doctor told me to eat about 6 p.m. the previous night and then only to have a small amount of water at breakfast time before coming to the hospital. I was to have nothing in me at 10 a.m. when I was to be treated. After the treatment, I would be strapped to the bed so I could not move for 12 hours to give the blood a chance to clot over the hole in my spinal column. There would be no toilet break in that 12 hours. If I, quote, had to go, end quote, it would be in the bed. I was told that I had to give if I moved, if there was any failure in the blood clotting, I'd have to do it all again, try it all again. So I did as I was advised. Alas, I think this was just before New Year's, might have been a day or two before New Year's, and it was the last day of the Melbourne Boxing Day Test match as I was watching that on the TV and waiting my turn in surgery. I was not taken to surgery until 5 p.m. I came out of surgery about 6 p.m. and I was brought back to my room. By this time I had not eaten anything for 24 hours and had not had any fluid for 10 hours or so. About 8 o'clock in the morning I had a sip of water. I was strapped to my bed and told to remain as still as possible to give the blood a chance to clot. So I was strapped in case I fell asleep and accidentally moved in my sleep. I asked the nurse for something to eat, perhaps some ice cream, and a little water to drink, please. She told me that, quote, feeding you is not my problem, end quote. Makes you wonder whose problem it is, right? I asked her for my cell phone so as to call my wife, and she refused to pass me my cell phone. When my wife arrived about 8 p.m, she came into the room with the nurse in question. While standing over me, the two of them made fun of me and joked at me, not with me or to me, but at me. The nurse said words to the effect, "He's acting like a child, begging for food and water." And Jennifer responded with, "I often think that I have 5 children in the house. Peter acts like a big child a lot of the time." This would be the same husband who was the sole income earner for the family of 6. That is the man they were attempting to insult and demean as a child. This is normal. Now, I was absolutely furious at this attempt to insult me and demean me when I was injured and in need of help. Indeed, paying the nurse to help me. When the nurse was gone, I told Jennifer that her comments were totally out of order. I told her again that she had made a vow to love and honour her husband, and bad-mouthing me to a despicable nurse when I am injured by another incompetent nurse and have not eaten for 26 hours and had not had fluids for 12 hours was totally, utterly and completely unacceptable to me as her husband. I asked her how she would feel if I had made fun of her or treated her this way when she was in hospital having our children. I reminded her how I had cared for her and made sure that she had the very best attention when she had our children. Yet here she was, mocking me for the very normal need to have some food and water. I told her I was very pleased our children had not witnessed her utterly disgraceful behaviour. I put the question to her, what would the children think if they saw their mother treat their father like this? So being suitably chastised, Jennifer then went to McDonald's to get some ice cream and some lemonade so that I could at least get some nourishment that would last me to 8 a.m. the next morning when I might be fed in the hospital. And I want you to remember, this was 1994. This is nearly 20 years ago. This is not like it was a recent thing. It's not just yesterday that women turned into nasty, hate-filled shrews such that nurses won't even feed men in hospitals. Indeed, in the UK recently, an elderly man was in a hospital and the nurse refused to give him food or water and refused to hand him his cell phone, and the man died overnight. Okay, the man died overnight. He was a dying man and nurses refused to feed him or give him water. This is how women treat men now. It's time to put a stop to that, in my opinion. Item 51. This is a classic. You're not going to be able to believe this. I have a lot of witnesses that say this is true. Item 51. Principal makes oath that in 1995, Jennifer and the 4 children went to Wagga for a school holiday. Jennifer was going to stay with my mother. With her mother and sisters around, she would be afforded a bit of a break with the 4 children. No one argues that taking care of 2 teenagers and 2 small children with a full-time working husband is an easy job. When the children are small, they require a lot of time and attention. This stage only lasts a few years per child. So I had agreed that being with her sisters and mother would be a nice break for her for the school holidays of the older children. So imagine my surprise when Jennifer calls me on the Friday afternoon and informs me that she has unilaterally decided to remain in Wagga and that I must come to Wagga to rent her a second home to live in with the children. I told her that we did not have the money to be able to do that and that she did not have my agreement to relocate to Wagga. She told me, words to the effect, not exactly, "So what, there is nothing you can do about it, you can't make me come back to Sydney," end quote. We lived in Sydney and Wagga was our hometown and our parents lived just a kilometre apart in Wagga. So she'd gone there for holidays and she was now saying, "You can't make me come back to Sydney." I said, words to the effect, not exactly it, "That is true enough. As we have often discussed, I cannot make you do anything. You are an adult. You have to want to do what you want to do." When I was young, my grandmothers had a saying they repeated to us often: "You made your bed, now sleep in it." So I went to visit Jennifer's parents. I flew down to Wagga and I went to visit Jennifer's parents to petition them to speak to their daughter. I explained we simply could not afford to be running 2 houses. Remember, I was a single income earner for a family of 6. Jennifer was not working at this time. Jennifer had refused to work at this time. She unilaterally quit work at this time. Okay? And so I was the sole income earner for a family of 6, running my own consulting business, which was very subject to lost contracts. If you lose a contract, you don't eat. At this time, I was running my own business. I wasn't a person in a large company with a guaranteed salary. I was running my own business. Apparently, Bill and Irene were not of the same stuff as my grandmothers, as they would not tell their daughter, "You made your bed, sleep in it." They condoned her relocating to Wagga. That's what they did. I at no time agreed to Jennifer's unilateral decision to move to Wagga, but you cannot force a woman and 4 children to return to the family home, since doing so would be called, quote, "domestic violence," unquote, or, quote, "controlling behaviour," unquote. now. You know, if a man says, I've bought this house for you to live in, you can't go live somewhere else because I can't afford you to go live somewhere else. You have to come back to the family home and live in it. That would be called controlling behaviour now. Okay? That's what that would be called. And you know that. Against my will, with no alternative action I could take, I rented a second home and took in boarders in our house in Sydney so as to do my best to make ends meet to pay for this outrageous demands Jennifer was making. And I would argue, if you are sitting in the jury or if you are in the public and you are a father and the sole income earner of a family of 6, I would argue that your wife upping sticks and moving to another city and demanding that you rent another house for her and find some way to pay for it is an outrageous demand. Okay? I would argue it is an outrageous demand. I don't know how many men can afford to do that. Certainly not many. I was well paid and I couldn't afford it even by a long way. So I would say it is an outrageous demand. The house in Wagga was only offered on a 12-month lease. It was actually the house of a minister for a church. And there was no clause allowed, and no clause allowed for subletting. Okay, so the house was a 12-month rental, 12 months lease. There was no subletting allowed. The agent for the house was a long-time family friend. His son and I had grown up together, so I'd known him for like 25 years. I'd known him since I was 5 years old. His son Matthew and I knew each other from when we were 5. He made it clear to me that if my wife changed her mind and moved back to Sydney, I would have to pay the rent, whether the house was occupied or not. He sat me down and he had a good long talk to me about that and said, Peter, can you know, I know your situation, I know your family, I know that you're a good man, but can you really do this? And you know you're going to have to pay. So he had that conversation with me. So imagine my even greater surprise when I took in boarders and we were trying to make ends meet and we were going backwards each month. We were having to borrow more money each month. So imagine my even greater surprise when, about 3 months later, Jennifer calls me out of the blue and says she's been speaking with the school, the local school, next to the family home in Sydney, and if Kristen did not return to the school, she would lose her place permanently at the school. They would give it to somebody else. So she tells me I have to kick the boarders out and she and the children are returning to Sydney to the family home so Kristen would not lose her school position. So apparently it's more important for the daughter to have her position in the school than for the wife and children to live with the father and husband. Apparently that's the priority now for women in the West. Remember, at no time during this process did any Western woman sanction or condemn or criticize Jennifer for what she was doing. Not one. I explain, and by the way, I've had hundreds, thousands of Western women condemn me to from here to eternity for criticizing Jennifer, but not one would criticize her upping sticks and moving to a new house, right? You're not allowed to criticize a woman anymore. They're deities, they're goddesses, right? I explained to Jennifer that this left us with a second house to pay for, with no money from boarders possible because it could not be sublet. And that's what the contract said. Her answer was, that's not my problem, that's none of my problem. You are the man, you have to pay for everything. That was her answer. That I'm moving back and you can't sublet this house and you have to, that's not my problem, you have to pay for it. That's how she answered. Okay? Remember, this was 1995. Principal makes oath that in 1994, so this is about 12 months before this up stakes and move trick, I was at my desk at IBM working with a colleague from the US, one Michaelin Park. Because Michaelin was my guest, I offered to take her to dinner after work. She agreed. I told her that I had to call my wife to let her know I would not be home for dinner and to expect me home late. Jennifer worked at IBM at the time. She had been working for IBM for 5 years, a job I was instrumental in helping her acquire. Jennifer was not at her desk, which was unusual for that time of day. So I called her manager, who was a good friend of mine as we worked together for nearly 2 years. He was a mentor of mine. Greg said it was very strange that I should call him, as Jennifer had not come to work and not called in sick. I was very concerned, so I called the house to find out if she was ill or if there was some problem. Jennifer answered, and when I asked if she was ill or there was some problem, she said she was fine. I asked her why she was not at work, and she said she had decided she did not want to go to work anymore. I was incredulous and asked when had she come to such a rash decision. She said that day. So I said that we would have to discuss this when I arrived home, as we had a mortgage to pay and 4 children to support. I noted the mortgage was based on our 2 incomes and that we simply could not pay for the house on my income alone. She sniffed and said, "Tough." That's what she did. She sniffed and said, "Tough." When I hung up and turned to Michaelin, her jaw was agape. She asked, "Did I just hear what I thought I just heard?" And I said she had that correct. She asked, "But have you and your wife ever talked about her not working?" And I said no. Indeed, after the birth of her 4th child, she was the one who was saying that she was climbing the walls at home and desperately wanted to get back to work. We have Jennifer's sister as our nanny. We have another friend with 2 children, also works at IBM, with the same age, who also drops her children at the house. So she also works for IBM. So Jennifer's sister Kerry has 4 children to look after at our house, and we all put in and pay her quite well for that work. We live only 4 kilometres from the office, the IBM office, so this arrangement is very convenient for everyone. I thought everyone was happy. This is the first I have heard of this. The babysitter is, her sister. So obviously a good babysitter, right? Her much younger sister. After dinner, I went home to discuss with Jennifer what she was talking about. She claimed she had unilaterally decided that she was never going back to work ever again. I asked her, "What about the house? What about the children? How do we pay for the house and the children if you refuse to go to work? You know what my salary is. You know we can't afford for you to stop working. You know we have signed a mortgage that is based on having 2 incomes. What do you think we're going to do?" And her response was, words very close to the effect, "I am the woman. What I'm going to do is raise the children. You are the man. You go figure out the money. That's not my problem anymore." Okay? That's what she did. And I said words to the effect, "Well, you put your signature on the mortgage contract. That means you agreed to pay your share of the mortgage," unquote. And her answer was, "Just because I signed the mortgage does not mean I have to pay my share. I never said I was going to pay my share, and if I never said it, I don't have to do it," end quote. This is how willful it had become. I pointed out, it is understood that when you put your signature on a contract, you are agreeing to pay your share of the contract, especially a mortgage, I said to her, and she sniffed and said, "Tough." Okay? So if you're a married man and you've got a wife who's working and you've got 4 children to support, imagine what it would be like if your wife just unilaterally decides, "I'm not going to work anymore." And by the way, 12 months later, decides she's going to up sticks and go relocate your children to another city 500 kilometres away, and says tough when she does this. This is what this woman is like. I have plenty of witnesses to the fact that she unilaterally quit work. Now, Jennifer has said under oath that the decision for her to stop work was mutual. This was never the case, and I have plenty of witnesses to that fact. Here is another one, and this is a little bit longer. Oh, sorry, this is about normal. Here is another one. Item 53. character of Jennifer Marguerite Toal. Principal makes oath that in 1994, the stress of trying to be the sole income earner for a family of 6 in Sydney at the age of 30 was extreme. Okay? It was extreme. Trying to wonder, I was now working in my own company. I'd resigned from IBM. I was working in my own company, and it was like, how can I feed a family of 6 on one salary in Sydney given the tax rates? So I was extremely distressed. Jennifer was being cruel and nasty and endlessly, and being a terrible wife. One thing I'll mention it here. At this time I insisted that we went to marriage counselling. The marriage counsellor was aghast at how Jennifer was treating me. She was shocked at how Jennifer was treating me. Stunned. When I recounted the time a year earlier that Jennifer had fed my food to the family dog to, quote, punish Peter for working too hard, I thought the marriage counsellor was going to have a heart attack. Let me repeat that. My loving, caring wife, when I was the sole income earner for a family of 6 during a recession where I was fearful of losing my job at IBM in late 93, fed my food to the dog. Okay? She fed my food to the dog. She fed the dog, small dog, so much food that both its cruciate ligaments and its back legs snapped. And then she insisted, despite the fact we were poverty-stricken, that we should pay the $500 to get the dog's legs fixed rather than have the dog put down. So she fed my food to the dog, overfed the dog, snapped the cruciate ligaments of the dog by overfeeding it, and then demanded that I pay for fixing the dog's legs. That's the kind of woman this is. Okay? The marriage counsellor was clear to Jennifer that she was placing far too great a set of demands on me and expressed surprise that I had not already walked out. She actually said, "I don't know any other man who would still be married to you." That's what she said. It was at this time that a colleague suggested I attend the Landmark Forum, which we duly attended in February 1995. On the Saturday night of the Landmark Forum, Jennifer and I had a heated debate, to put it mildly, in the hotel room, and I told her that I was completely, totally and utterly fed up with her disgusting and disgraceful behaviour, and that on Wednesday, when the class was over, I was going to get a lawyer and file for divorce. February 1995. I told her the marriage was over and that I would be leaving just as soon as was practical. I proposed that I would take my son and she could take her daughter, and that would be that, and no child support would be payable. She had good skills. I'd put her through university and I'd gotten her a good job at IBM. She was going to be cut free and on her own. She was in much better position than when she first met me. On the Sunday of the forum, Jennifer told the friends she had made that we were going to divorce. The friends noted things like, "Well, he must have hit you," or "he must have been nasty to you for you to be treating him like this." Yes, the thought was, yes, you are treating him terribly, but he must deserve it. He must have hit you. He must be nasty. He must be a horrible husband. That's how the conversation, reported by no less than Jennifer, that conversation was reported back to me by Jennifer. Okay. Jennifer reported to me that she said no, that I was never violent, nor even overly angry, that I had never mistreated her or the children in any way. Indeed, that I was very good to the children and the pets, and was one of the kindest, most caring people she had ever met. So her friends asked her what was so wrong with me that she was prepared to get divorced. They noted that if I was, as she described, that I was, quote, something of a catch, unquote. And apparently they had this conversation over dinner. Jennifer realized in this instant that she had been the willful one and she had destroyed the marriage. She came to me This is on the Sunday night. She came to me and begged me to take her back, promising to be a better wife. Okay? Because I loved her very much and wanted our family to be successful, I took her back on her promises that she would improve her ways and do as I asked her to do. She promised, but the promises only lasted about 6 months. It was about 6 months later that she pulled the relocate to Augusta. So February 1995 was the first time that I threw in the towel and said, I cannot tolerate your disgraceful behavior anymore. And when she talked it over with these friends at the forum, she realized that she was the one who was causing the destruction of the marriage. And she begged me to take her back. February 1995, it is well known in our family history that Jennifer begged me to take her back in February 1995. Okay? Everyone in our family knows about that incident. So if you, the jury, want to get corroboration from anybody else, you can call up, you can subpoena Jared Robertson, you can subpoena Bill or Irene Toal, okay, to ask them to provide their testimony of that time. Item 54. Now this is a slightly longer one because it needs to be explained. And you know, this is a jury trial. You should be given all the information that's relevant. Item 54. Principal makes oath that in April 2002, I was working in New Jersey, USA. Jennifer came to stay for a week or so. Again, she was up to her old tricks of being very abusive towards me. So I had planned a wonderful week for her so as to demonstrate one more time how much I loved her and how much I wanted us to be together. This was, in my mind, the last effort to try and get this woman to behave even decently. Just stop abusing me. You know, being different to me would be a big step up. Stop abusing me. Okay? Stop tormenting me. Stop pushing my buttons. Stop irritating me. Be nice for a change. If you can't be nice, at least just be indifferent. This was the conversation. So during that week, I had to go to a conference in Boston, USA. I also had to attend meetings in Boston. So I organized a great package deal at a 5-star hotel called the Swiss Hotel in Boston. I got a very good price on it. We even managed an upgrade to a suite because they weren't very well booked. It was I think they were renovating or something else like that. There was some reason why we got such a great package. The list price was about $350 per night, if memory serves me. I took her to shows. We went to 2 shows. I took her to Legal Seafood, where you can get the second best clam chowder in Boston. And the reason we didn't go to get the best clam chowder in Boston because you can't get in. I gave her spending money to go shopping and enjoy her days while I attended the conference I had to attend and attended the meetings I had to attend. In short, I showed her the best possible time, and you can ask her yourself about that week. She raved about it for years afterwards, because it's not often you get to stay in the Swiss Hotel in Boston and get given some money to go shopping and enjoy your days, be taken up to shows and be taken to nice restaurants. That's pretty good living, okay? Without the kids, we had our daughter Kristen over to mind the kids. When we returned to my apartment in New Jersey, she went right back to form, treating me very poorly. Now, this is to understand. At one stage, she was so cruel and so vicious, and these personal attacks had been going on for so long, 7 years, okay? Well, maybe 8 years with a 6-month break, okay? These personal attacks had been going on for so long in the face of all my efforts to demonstrate that I loved her and asking her to return to being the woman I had married, that I lost my temper. Okay, and this incident is well known in our family. It's quite public. I was extremely taken by surprise, as I was 38 years of age at this point in time, and I had not lost my temper since I was a 12-year-old. Okay. Last time I lost my temper, I was on a football field and I'd been aggravated at somebody and I got really angry and I smacked him. So I was 38 years of age and I had not lost my temper since I was 12 years old. As I flew into a blind rage of a lost temper, I was present enough, and I realized that I was about to become possibly dangerous to Jennifer. Okay, so as you know, the red steam rises, I realized I might hurt Jennifer. Okay, so I ran from the room we were in to the second bathroom of the apartment so that I could lock the door behind me. The main bathroom did not have a lockable door. It was a walk-in bathroom. It's a very big apartment. It was like 130 square meters. Jennifer ran after me and came to the door even before I had a chance to close it, and was pulling on the door trying to get in. Presumably, she wanted to torment me some more, realizing that she'd really upset me. Since I am much bigger and stronger, I was able to pull the door shut against her efforts to get in. I knew then that she would be safe from me while I was in a rage and had lost my temper. Now, many people have claimed that because this incident happened, that I am somehow a, quote, violent man, unquote. The truth is actually the direct opposite. We are human. If we are endlessly provoked and treated with callous cruelty by the one we love, we will eventually lose our temper. The mildest of dogs will bite you. The mildest of dogs will bite you if you poke it with a stick often enough. Because I had last lost my temper as a 12-year-old child on a football field, and I had suffered all sorts of trials and tribulations through my life since then, I had absolutely no expectation or even idea that it was possible for Jennifer to push my buttons so hard and so long, so cruelly, so viciously, so vindictively for so long that I might actually lose my temper. It came as a complete surprise to me. Okay? Having lost my temper and become enraged, I had the presence of mind to lock myself in the second bathroom so as to ensure Jennifer's safety. A very important point is this. Okay, I want to make this point very clear to all you jury members. The second bathroom was clear across a 130 square meter apartment. I had to run across the living area to get into that bathroom. When I arrived, I went in the door and turned to pull the door shut. Okay, so I ran across that room. Jennifer already had hold of the door handle on the other side of the door when I grabbed the door handle. She already had hold of the door handle. This means that Jennifer must have also run across the living room to be right behind me to be able to struggle with the door. Okay? So I've run across the living room to get to this bathroom. Okay? That means, beyond any doubt, that Jennifer had absolutely no fear of me. Even though at that moment I was in a blind rage and I had lost my temper, she tried to get into the same room as me against my will. There can be no question at all that she had absolutely no fear for her safety, and you are welcome to cross-examine her on that event. Obviously, Jennifer had never seen me lose my temper. Okay? When I was a little boy, I had quite a nasty temper because my older brothers would pick on me and annoy me so as to provoke me into fighting with them. Then, me being smaller and weaker because I was the youngest, having provoked me, they would beat me up. Okay? Out of this practice, I had developed quite a temper to deal with the cruelty of my older brothers. And that's what it was. It was just plain cruelty. Now, Jennifer was not aware of the nasty temper I had as a child. Since I had not lost my temper since I was 12, I figured that it was just, quote, something I grew out of. When I was no longer being tormented by my older brothers, and this happens with children, right? Some children have nasty tempers when they're young because they're being provoked all the time. On the other hand, I knew perfectly well that I could, quote, fight like a banshee, unquote, when I had lost my temper. Of course, as a child, you can't really do any damage to anybody. You know, a 10-year-old boy is not going to hurt anybody if he loses his temper, right? But as a 38-year-old man, I had the presence of mind enough to be fully aware that if I struck Jennifer in that frame of mind, I would most likely severely injure her, if not kill her, with a single blow. So I remember the thought crossing through my mind at that point in time, if I hit her, I might kill her, right? After this event, so I stayed in the bathroom for about 15 minutes. Then I came out and I had a glass of water and I sat down and had a cup of coffee and we sat down. So when I settled down and I had a cup of coffee, we sat down, okay? And I sat down with Jennifer and I told her that I had lost my temper for the first time since I was 12. I told her that because I loved her and because she had chosen to provoke me and be cruel to me and be vicious to me for so many years, I could no longer trust myself around her if I were to make similar efforts to profess my love and ask her to be the woman she was when we were first together. I told her that I had stuck to my marriage vows and my Christian faith, and every day for many years I had asked God to please touch her heart and bring back to me the woman I had fallen in love with, and not this she-devil shrew who was now before me. That's what I called her. I told her she was a she-devil shrew. I told her that I could not take any more and we had to divorce. It was that simple. This is 2002, remember. I told her that although she did not understand, I could have killed her just now. I told her, straight to her face, I said, I know you don't understand, but I could have killed you just now. And I was terrified of myself in that state. I told her that I loved her and could never allow myself to be abused like that, like she had been abusing me, because I was afraid I might one day lose my temper again. Having lost my temper for the first time since I was 12, the realization that I had to live with was that I might lose my temper with you again. You know me so well, you know how to hurt me, you're doing it deliberately, it's not a mistake, it's not an accident, you are deliberately provoking me, and because you know me so well, I'm afraid you might provoke me again like that and I might lose my temper again. I told her that it was in both our best interests that when I returned from this consulting contract, we would cancel our planned holiday, we would return to Australia, we would sell the house, split the children, and we would get on with our lives. I told her I simply could not take her abuse anymore. I couldn't do it. I was fearful that further such abuse might end with her being severely injured or dead. That's what I was fearful of. I said, this is it, this marriage is over. Now she took these statements very badly as we were sitting there. She begged and begged for me to change my mind. And I told her that it was simply no longer possible for me to be married to her. She was simply too cruel and had now become dangerous. It had now become dangerous for her. I said there was no alternative, we had to divorce. I put her on the plane back to Dublin and started considering my future without her. That was April 2002, and I want you jury members to understand that. I was not due to finish my contract until the end of June, so Jennifer was back in Dublin a few months before I returned. During this time, she constantly wanted me to call her, and she begged and begged to at least go on the holiday we had planned. We had planned a 3-month holiday in Europe after the end of this contract for the summer holidays. I told her that I did not want to go on holiday with her, as I did not want to be near her anymore. She begged and begged and begged and then begged some more, just to go on the holiday and give her a chance to talk to me and talk about some way back. She made all sorts of promises. I told her that I no longer believed any of her promises because she had simply treated me too badly. In the end, I relented on the extended holiday in Europe. We planned to do it as just friends and not as man and wife. We agreed to not discuss these issues to the children until the appropriate time. This would be our last hurrah before returning to Sydney to divorce and get on with our lives. So this was kind of like two friends who were going to go take a trip around Europe for 13 weeks, given that we were already there. It wasn't that I didn't love her, it wasn't that she didn't love me, it was that she'd become dangerous. She was so vicious and cruel, it had become dangerous for her to be around me. That's what the problem was. And I'm quite open about that, right? We spent 13 weeks in close proximity, with 8 weeks of it without the children around. They were with our eldest daughter, Kristen, who had come over to au pair for us. During that time, Jennifer begged over and over again to be given another chance. I said no, right? 13 weeks, she begged to be given another chance. I said no. I told her I could not tolerate her cruelty and did not trust myself around her anymore. I told her, very much like a dog that had been kicked once too often, I was not 100% sure I would not bite her back. I told her, you did this once too often. Okay? It was over. And we had 13 weeks of her begging me and me saying, no, it's over. Okay? So far from her characterization of me as a bad husband, it was exactly the opposite. And this is also covered in a book, in another letter in 2007, which you might want to read. As per usual, she made all sorts of promises of how she would change. I told her I was not buying any promises. One of the proposals Jennifer came up with was, I will go back to work and I can help you support the family. I told her flat out I did not believe that either. When we got back to Dublin, now this is important to understand. When we got back to Dublin, as luck would have it, we went to dinner with an Australian couple who had not long been in Dublin. She was a teacher at the school the children went to, and he worked at the Australian Embassy. Over dinner, she asked us whether we had considered getting Irish citizenship, and we replied that we did not make the cut-off based on Jennifer's grandparents and that Australians could only gain citizenship by marriage or birth, so this option was not open to us. She corrected me. Now remember, this was October 2002. We had literally just gotten back from our 3-month holiday, and we were preparing to quit Ireland and go back to Australia. We hadn't broken the news to anybody yet. She corrected me and said that in just April 2002, the Australian legislation had changed and that it was now allowable for Australians to apply for a foreign citizenship based on living in the country rules. I checked the legislation and found this to be so. Jennifer and I then went down to the Naturalisation and Immigration Department in Ireland to inquire as to the process and the likelihood of being successful. We explained that Jennifer was about 90% Irish stock and that her grandfather was indeed born in Ireland. It was only that her mother was not registered as a foreign birth before 1986 that we missed out on citizenship by birth. So it was that close. If her mother had registered as a foreign birth before 1986, then she would have gained Irish citizenship by birth. The lady we talked to said that since we had missed out merely by failure of Jennifer's mother to be registered as a foreign birth before 1986, our application would go through on the nod because it was such a narrow miss in the first place. She also noted that since my background included about 50% Irish stock and that I was a Nolan Pell, most of you won't know that Nolan is an incredibly common name in Ireland, that would also help matters. It was clear we were of Irish heritage and that it was most likely the case my ancestors were economic migrants courtesy of the British. All in all, the conversation finished with, you live here for 5 years, you apply, you should be done in 6 months after the application. That is the backlog right now. I can't see any possible problem with your situation. That's how the conversation went. The fact that the children had arrived in Ireland when they were 7 and 9 would also be taken into account, as by the time 5.5 years was up, they would have spent a significant portion of their lives in Ireland. This changed the situation somewhat. Jennifer changed from please remarry me because I will change to please stay with me for the sake of the children. Getting Irish citizenship for the children would be a great opportunity for them. They will have much greater opportunities in life with dual citizenship. And then our grandchildren will also have dual citizenship. If you will not stay married to me for me, please stay married to me for the children and in the best interest of the children. That was the pitch. That's how the pitch changed. Since you, the jury, are mainly fathers, You will know that an appeal like this is quote, in the best interest of the children, unquote, is a very compelling argument. It would be true that should we be able to gain citizenship for the children, they would have very much better chances in life. That would be true. Okay? Australia is such a small marketplace, and Europe offered much more in the way of opportunities. This would be a way of us getting our children European citizenship and EU citizenship, and then any grandchildren would also have dual citizenship of Australia and Europe. The opportunities for our children and our children's children would be far greater if we were able to make Irish citizenship. Okay, that was the argument. So I asked Jennifer what she proposed and what she would contribute to this effort. She vowed and declared how she was, quote, willing to do whatever it takes to get the children's citizenship, unquote. Vowed and declared time and time again in this conversation. So we discussed this at length, of course. Our agreement included Jennifer agreeing to return to work in our company. It also included splitting the asset of the house 50-50 at that point in time. Okay, that was our agreement. She promised this. She gave her word, she gave her oath. Split the house 50-50 at this point in time, plus I work to support myself. And that's what I'm going to do in this effort to work together and cooperate to get the children's citizenship. I told Jennifer that she was to be very clear that she was giving her word to split the asset of the house 50-50 and that she would work as best she could on software development for my software. She vowed and declared this is what she was going to do. And you can ask her that question yourself. Of course, she did not do this. Within a few months, she was not doing this. She again refused to assist me in my company to the best of her ability. So after a while, I told her that I was going to bill her against her asset of the house for her costs if she refused to apply herself to work to support herself. By now, the children were 11 and 13 and were in far less need of Jennifer's time and attention. Jennifer had more than enough time to work from home as she said she would and as I wanted her to. She simply refused to do it. In this period from 2003 to 2007, when we would have conversations about the money, Jennifer would always sneer at me and say things like, I don't have to work, I'm living off my half of the house. Like she earned any of it in the first place, right? She wasn't the one who renovated houses. She wasn't the one who went out to work, right? If you, the jury, would like confirmation from anyone that Jennifer often said, quote, I do not need to work, I'm living off my half of the house, end quote, you can subpoena any of Joshua John, Josephine Marguerite, or Jared Robinson. Jennifer will not deny that she said this often, as there are too many people who heard her say it, right? The incident that precipitated our divorce was me challenging Jennifer on this point. By 2007, now one of the reasons I was comfortable about being near Jennifer was I was emotionally distant from her in order to defend myself from her vicious, cruel attacks. Emotional attacks. The only way for me to defend myself from her vicious, cruel, emotional attacks, which she openly admits, she has openly admitted doing this in writing, was for me to be more emotionally distant. So when she tried to abuse me, I could say, that doesn't work anymore. You know, I don't care about what you say enough for that to hurt me anymore. When I loved you as much as I used to, that used to hurt. Now it doesn't. Congratulations. So she wasn't very happy about that. Okay? So by 2007, Jennifer was sneering at me very frequently. When we get divorced, I'm going to take you for everything I can get. She made this sneering comment so many times, about 6 as I recall, in the first half of 2007, that I was fed up with her. And I said to her words to the effect, quote, when you refused to pay your share of the mortgage, you said it was because you never said you would pay it, even though you wrote your signature on a contract. You said you only had to pay for things you said you would pay for. Now, you said, and you have repeated many times over in front of many people, that you are living on your half of the house. That half is almost expended. Now you have said to me in a cruel and sneering fashion that, quote, when we get divorced, I'm going to take you for everything I can get. That would be breaking your promise of 2002, which was the only reason I agreed to make the effort to try for citizenship for the children. I now require you to put your signature on a letter documenting the promise you made. If you attempt to, quote, take me for everything you can get, unquote, I will give that letter to your children, your mother, and your father, and you will be revealed for the gold-digging liar and hypocrite you will have chosen to be. That's what I said to her. I said that to her on the phone. I said that to her on the phone, and then not long after, I did a trip home, and I handed her that letter to sign. Okay, so that's what I said to her on the phone. When I was home in August 2007, it must have been about the 11th of August, I handed Jennifer the letter I had drafted for her, with her promise written on it for her to sign. So it was drafted as, I have made this promise, I've given my word. And I asked her to sign. All the letter said was, in 2002, I made this promise to Peter, I gave him my word, and this is my signature to put in writing the fact that I made this promise. That's all the letter said, right? Jennifer later claimed that it was a lawful document to transfer ownership of the house, which was rubbish. It was just a handwritten letter saying I'd made this promise and I'm signing this, so the promise, which was verbal, was put into writing as evidence. That's all the letter was, right? Putting what she had said on paper. And she made all sorts of claims about it was a contract to sign over her half of the house. Complete rubbish, more lies. Okay, so when I was home in August 2007, I handed Jennifer the letter for her with her promise written on it for her to sign. She refused to sign that letter, and in doing so, made it clear she was going to attempt to steal from me. So in the evening, when she was asleep, I put a keylogger on the computer, and the next day I picked up her Hotmail password off the keylogger, right? I then monitored her Hotmail account without her knowledge from about the 11th of August 2007 to mid-January 2008 without her knowledge. Okay? This is how I found out that she went to the bank the very next day, the Monday. I flew out Monday morning. She went to the bank that Monday and stole 18,000 euros from our company account. I found that out because, and this is under oath, I'm saying this under oath, I found that out because I saw a letter from her to Fiona Brazel, an email on Hotmail, from her to Fiona Brazel that said she had just gone to the bank and taken 18,000 euros out of the bank account, company bank account. That makes Fiona Brazel an accessory to that crime. Fiona Brazel, as an officer of the court, was required to report that crime. So Fiona, I have that email. This is how I found out that she had been in conversation with Fiona Brazel, her family law lawyer, for months. I went through Jennifer's sent mail in her Hotmail box, and I could see she'd been talking to Fiona Brazel for months. So this is where the sneering, I'm going to take you, when we get divorced, I'm going to take you for everything we can get. It's been the Fiona Brazel in her ear, telling her how she can screw me over in the Irish family law courts. That's what that was about, right? When I finally got Jennifer's telephone records for my telephone that she used, it turned out, this was August, it turned out she had been calling Fiona Brazel since May. Okay? So May, June, July, August. She'd been speaking with this woman for 3 months, more than 3 months. She had been speaking with Fiona Brazel. Okay? So, the character of this woman, Jennifer Marguerite Toal, and other men who might know her might want to know this, was that while she was telling me she was not talking to any lawyers in Ireland, I was seeing almost daily communication between her and Fiona Brazel. This woman, Jennifer Marguerite Toal, had no qualms at all at being exposed as the liar and hypocrite she chose to be. Why? Because she figured that everyone would help her and everyone would attack me when she committed perjury and slandered me. And you know why she believed that? Because that's what everyone did. Okay? She slandered me. She said I was a bad father. She said I committed adultery. She said I abandoned the children. She said all these things. Okay? And immediately everyone attacked me. And I said, this is slander. Not only is it slander, it's perjury. And I demand this perjury be withdrawn. I demand she is charged with perjury. I demand all this is stricken, made public and stricken with her renouncing it. That's what I demand. And I demanded that in November 2007. Here we are in April 2013, and I'm still demanding the perjury that this woman committed be publicly denounced by her and stricken, and that I am compensated for all the injury, harm and loss that I have been caused based on that perjury. Over 5 years later, nearly 5.5 years later, I'm still demanding that she is held accountable for her perjury. So why did this woman have absolutely no concern at all, no qualms at all, at being exposed as a liar, a criminal, a perjurer, a hypocrite, a gold digger, an adulteress, and a child abuser? Why did she have no concern about being revealed as these things? Because she's a woman, and nobody's ever going to criticize a woman. Doesn't matter how bad they are. In the West, doesn't matter how bad they are. And she knew she could tell a bunch of lies and get everyone to attack me. Well, you 12 men on the jury, is this the society you want to live in? Or do you want to send a message to women? No, perjury is not okay. You will be held accountable. If you attempt to attack a man with perjury, you will be held accountable. What is it you, the jury, choose to do? It's your choice. Well, now this is all out in the public. The question for you, the jury, is really quite simple in the end. Do you, as the representatives of the people who live on the land known as Australia, condone and support such behaviour? And if so, you must condone it and support it on an equal before the law basis for men and women alike. If you allow this behaviour from Jennifer, then we must also allow this behaviour from men, the consequences of which are obvious. Now, the next piece is, you can see that I've signed it. You can see that it's the 13th day of the 4th month, 13th of April, near Karlsruhe, Germany. Okay. I have affixed the MBA stamp, and there is only one of these in existence, so you can be assured that this document is genuine. Lastly, petition of proposed remedy to the jury. Remember, I am entitled, I have the right to settle this dispute under natural law. Okay? I have the right to go and deal with this woman as I see fit. Okay? I absolutely have that right, and I have never at any time waived that right. I claim the right to deal with this woman as I see fit. Indeed, I haven't mentioned it here before, but I will just mention it for the jury. I was made no less than 4 offers by men to see my wife meet a fatal accident. Each man who suggested that to me, and one suggested he'd do it just for expenses, he didn't even want to be paid. He just said, after what I've seen your wife do, let me do this favour for you. And I said, no, don't you dare. If you harm one hair on her head, you'll answer to me. And he said, okay, as you wish. So I had no less than 4 offers for Jennifer to meet with an accident, a fatal accident. And I said, no, you are not to harm this woman. She is to stand trial, and she is to be publicly denounced as a criminal, and she is to make remedy for her crimes. That is what I want. I'm taking the moral high road, because if she dies, I'm fine. But if she dies, all these other men who are abused are not going to be fine. So she has to live such that I can take her through the jury trial process, have her denounced as a criminal, have her make remedy for her crimes as the precedent for all the other men to be able to follow. It's taken 5.5 years, but one thing I want the jury to understand is my word alone kept this woman alive. On my say-so, this woman would have been dead a long time ago, and there's no chance that anybody would have been tracked down for that. No chance at all. The men who volunteered to do the job, there's no chance anybody's going to find out who that was. Okay, they certainly wouldn't find out from me. So I protected Jennifer. I want you, the jury members, to know I protected her to make sure that we would get to this day, we would get to this trial. Okay? So we're now at the point where I petition the jury for a proposed remedy. You can check with your expert in common law, but the way common law works is if you wish the protection of the common law, then you must choose to be subject to the common law. Okay? The common law is a moderated form of natural law, meaning by moderating, the strong don't get to victimize the weak merely because they are strong and the others are weak. Common law strengthens the weak and moderates the actions of the strong to be a community-supported path to justice. So the 12 men of the jury, their role is to moderate the urge, if you want to call it that, for summary justice from men, and to apply relatively consistent rulings to the situation so that everybody feels that they have a fair and just trial, and that does not encourage summary justice or vigilantism. It is to discourage summary justice and vigilantism. Okay? So while you have a path to justice, while you are subject to common law, such actions as summary justice and vigilantism are not lawful. Okay? But if you don't have a path to justice via common law, such actions as summary justice and vigilantism are lawful under natural law. That's how that works, and you can check with your expert in common law about that. Okay? So I'm petitioning the jury for a proposed remedy under common law, and I at any time can waive the protection of the common law and live in natural law. Okay? And given that nobody protected me, waiving the protection of common law doesn't mean anything to me, because I haven't had the protection of common law for the last 5.5 years, have I? Okay? So you, the jury, are being told and recommended to understand, I have the right to act against this woman under natural law. Should I see fit, I can waive the protection of common law and go about whatever I want to do. Okay? So you, the jury, are being petitioned, and I'm asking you, the jury, to treat this woman just like you would treat a man. Okay? I'm asking you to not be sexist, discriminatory, or bigoted in any way. Treat this woman just like you would treat a man. Okay? And by the way, whatever decision you make will set the precedent for the opposite direction. So that little speech over. To you, the jury, respondent has refused to show any form of cooperation to date. She has been told that she can get away with these crimes, and she seems to believe that to be the case. It is pointless to offer her a proposed remedy. She's been offered many proposed remedies before. Principal proposes to give respondent until the 30th of April 2013 to make a public response to this affidavit of accusation. Principal presumes that there is no possible chance respondent will respond. In the face of what I consider to be an almost certainty, Principal makes public the following petition for a proposed remedy to the jury. So Jennifer Marguerite Toal has until the end of the month, that is 2 weeks, 2 and a bit weeks, to make a public response to this affidavit of accusation, which is plenty of time because she'll have it tomorrow, the 14th of April. This is what Principal believes is fair and just. However, the proposed remedy given to the respondent must be a unanimous decision of the jury. So you, the jury, the 12 of you, have to decide unanimously what you believe is fair and just based on all evidence presented to you. And Jennifer is quite welcome to read into YouTube evidence to present to you, okay? Or record it in some way, shape or form. 1. Respondent to return all property of the principal, meaning the approximately 280,000 Australian dollars balance plus reasonable interest to be determined by the jury that was stolen and given to her as a proceeds of crime. I would also like return to my personal papers that were never returned to me. These include my birth certificate, my degree testimonial, and my paperwork for my superannuation funds. I have not even been able to track down all my superannuation accounts because of the refusal of respondent to cooperate. I mean, this woman has known me since I was 12 years old. She can't even give me back my paperwork for my superannuation funds. This is how disgracefully women behave in the West today. Your husband of 18 years is not entitled to the documentation of his superannuation. Why is it that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned is still allowed? Why is that? I thought women were equal. Okay? 2. Respondent to pay the 21,000 euros in fees from Pierce Neary and the 46,300 Australian dollars in fees from Watts McRae plus reasonable interest to be determined by the jury. Remember, this is on top of returning the stolen property. 3. Respondent to pay 100,000 Australian dollars pain and suffering for driving a man to the edge of suicide and severely injuring his health and well-being in a vicious, vindictive, cruel, callous, despicable, and just plain evil attempt to steal from him using the criminal cartel known as a legal fraternity, including stealing his children, not to mention the vile crime of using his own children as weapons against him and using his children as weapons against his elderly and ill mother. I think $100,000 for that is possibly light on, given that there was a woman in Australia recently who was given $27 million for alleged sexual harassment in the workplace. Okay? I want you to listen to that, jury. Women in Australia think it's okay for a woman to be given $27 million for alleged sexual harassment in the workplace. And I'm asking for $100,000 for being driven to the edge of suicide. I think I might be a little light on. If you, the jury, decide to put the public purse into the equation, you might want to revise that number up, because every cent I get out of this, I'm going to use to build schools and help young boys whose fathers have killed themselves due to the criminal abuse of their wives in the family law courts. When I get money out of this, I'm going to build charities and build schools to help those young lads whose fathers killed themselves. That's what I'm going to do with this money. So you, the jury, any money you give me, That's where it's going. Any of this extra money, pain and suffering, other money you give me, that's where it's going. Okay? So you might want to be generous in that area. Number 4, the pain and suffering, that money, that's going to charity, every cent. Number 4, respondent to pay 100,000 Australian dollars for the damage to reputation and damage to business by the slander spread about by the respondent and her accomplices such as Chris Merritt, Chris Rubis and Michael Toal. So you can refer to other cases, but Chris Merritt, Chris Rubis and Michael Toal have been slandering me for a long time with the full approval of the respondent. The respondent knows about this. And with the full approval of William Toal as well. So I say the damage to my reputation caused by a respondent not denouncing this slander is 100,000 Australian dollars. And I have a case against Chris Merritt for $100,000 and a case against Chris Rubis for $20,000, which you can see on the YouTube channel. Along with this 100,000 Australian dollar payment will be a public statement by a respondent that she made up all these lies in a deliberate attempt to extort money from me with threat of damage to my good name, which she has subsequently managed to do via her accomplices. And that has to be in a video showing her face. I think $100,000 plus a video showing her face saying my affidavits were a pack of lies and I did it deliberately so as to cause this man injury, harm and loss, and I apologize and make this public statement that everything I said about him was false. I want that statement on a video, not in writing and not under oath. I want it in a video with her face. Because the last time she had me assaulted and injured by the police in 1997, she made oath in a magistrate's court that she would never claim that that was a violent act ever again. And even having made oath in a magistrate's court, that was not enough. So I want a video this time. I want a video, and I'm going to post it on my channel, and I'm going to say to all those women who said I must be a bad husband, here's the woman's face telling you this is what went on. That's what I want. And I believe that you, the jury, will be very well advised to find that way. Okay? But it is up to you. With all this perjury, with all this slander, with all this damage to my good name over such an extended period, what do you, the jury, unanimously believe is the appropriate resolution for that? Okay? Number 5. The respondent to pay 50,000 Australian dollars for the time and effort that the principal has been put to bring her to justice in the first place. I have spent an inordinate amount of time bringing this woman to justice, bringing this to trial process. If the respondent had not committed all these crimes, then principal would not have had to spend a very large amount of his time working to regain the property that respondent stole via her criminal accomplices in the legal fraternity. I think that's worth $50,000. What do you think, Mr. Jury Member? You know, if you were in my position, how much would you think it is worth to spend the best part of 5 elapsed years trying to defend your good name from your wife who slandered you and perjured herself to slander your good name? Is $50,000 enough? You guys, you 12 decide for yourself. What do you think should be done? Remembering that women think 27 million is an appropriate amount for supposed sexual harassment in the office. Okay? Remember what the women say is good enough for the women. And perhaps you might want to go through some other other decisions where women have had massive payouts. You know, just for complaining. 6, and this will be the hardest decision that the jury has to face. This is the remedy payment for the kidnapping of principal's former children. Now, principal cannot even begin to imagine how you, the jury, are going to sort that one out. Okay, I want a payment for the kidnapping and abuse of my children and the poisoning of the minds of my children to the extent, and the violation of my rights as a father to the extent that I was compelled to disown these children. I want to be paid for that. Okay? And that's a very difficult question. That's the most difficult question you're going to have to come to grips with. Now, many people say children are priceless. Well, you're about to put a price on a child, and this is going to be very difficult. Principal makes oath. Okay? Principal makes oath here in the public, in his own name, that whatever amount I am paid for the remedy payment for each child, this will become the standard amount that a man must pay a mother to take his child and deny access to that child to the mother. I'm saying that under oath. Okay? So whatever I'm given as remedy payment for the kidnapping, abuse, theft, and poisoning, and in the end disowning of my children, my former children, alleged children, no DNA test, remember, was allowed by the mother. Whatever I'm paid, that is going to be the standard amount that a man must pay a mother to take his child. If he proves it's his child by DNA, he can give the woman that cash and leave and deny access to that child to the mother. That's my claim. And if anyone has a problem with that claim, feel free to put it in writing and send it to me in your own name, and I will publish it. Now, in this jury trial, we're going to establish the, quote, price of a child, unquote, via this case. The very fact that women in the Western world feel totally at ease kidnapping children and know full well they will never be held to account for such a crime is an unspeakable state of affairs. Everyone knows that this is a state of affairs, but no one has the bravery to talk about it for fear of being called a, quote, woman hater, unquote. Okay, I've been called a woman hater from here to breakfast time for standing up for my rights and the rights of other fathers. Women can call me a woman hater all they like. The very fact that Jennifer felt completely at ease at kidnapping children, as do pretty much every other Western woman, and the fact that all you Western women know this goes on and none of you are talking about it, is an unspeakable state of affairs. And if you want to call me a woman hater for pointing out this unspeakable state of affairs, then go ahead. Call me a woman hater. I don't care. In Germany, if you said to a woman, can a woman steal a baby away from a father who loves that father and wants to raise it? The women would be aghast and say, of course not. The child has two parents. You can't steal, you can't abuse a child by removing one parent. In Germany, removing a parent is absolutely seen as severe child abuse. Absolutely, that's the view of it. So when I say these things in Germany, I get very strongly supported. Women in Germany will say, under no conditions must a woman be allowed to use a child as a weapon against the father, and if she does, she's an unfit mother. That's the conversation you'll have in Germany. Okay? So, simply put, in the future, a mother can no more kidnap a child from a father as a father can kidnap a child from a mother. Now, if what we intend to do at the Men's Business Association is to set the benchmark. What I'm paid for my children is the amount that a man must pay to a mother to take a child. That's what I'm saying. Okay? Now you, the jury, might want to make the amount small or you, the jury, might want to make the amount large. You, the jury, can decide whether the amount is paid by Jennifer, or whether Jennifer has to go petition people for that money, or whether it's a public purse. You have a choice. We are going to have equality before the law no matter who objects, how loudly, and no matter what they say. Okay, let me say that again. We are going to have equality before the law no matter who objects, how loudly, and no matter what they say. So objections to the premise of equality before the law, you are welcome to make them in your own name. I will publish them. Anyone who objects to equality before the law, I'm quite happy for you to write to me. I will publish that. Anybody who sticks something in my inbox without my explicit agreement not to publish it is an agreement to publish it. Right? The Men's Business Association will offer MBA law services observing equality before the law is paramount, and we will not brook rebuke or criticism on this point. Those who criticize us on this point will be publicly denounced for doing so. We now have the ability to do this with our Crimes Against Fathers site, with more than 100,000 hits a month. Principal makes oath that the Men's Business Association will set the remedy amount as the transfer amount for guardianship of a child, and once paid via the MBA will offer the protection of the law using force up to and including deadly force for any man who avails of that service. I make that oath in public, in my own name. Okay? So, the very difficult decision that is in front of you, the jury, is how will you set that amount? How will you set the amount respondent must pay for the price of one boy 14 and one girl 16 who were kidnapped and abused and the father's rights violated? I wish you luck deliberating that, because you are going to need it. Remember, this includes these two children lost their father. I lost my two children and the opportunity to have grandchildren. I will never have children or grandchildren because of the crimes this woman committed and because of the willingness of my society to condone those crimes. How am I to be compensated for that? And however I am to be compensated for that is exactly what we are going to do to women. Exactly. We are going to reflect it exactly equal before the law. And we make no apologies for that. Lastly, you, the jury, might be of concern that the amounts you award respondent will not have the amounts you award respondent will not have the money to pay. Okay, she obviously is not wealthy. She stole some money from me, but she's not wealthy. She doesn't have the money to pay for all this, right? I petition the jury to consider this point. Many of the people who aided and abetted respondent in the commissioning of her crimes are millionaires. Many of them. I know them. Many of our so-called circle of friends are millionaires. Every single one of them backed her, despite the fact every single one of them knew she was a criminal. It was unanimous. Back the woman, hate the man. That was unanimous. So those people who surrounded her and backed her, they have a great deal of money. They went out of their way to support someone they knew to be a criminal. I petition the jury to issue remedy instructions on the basis that those people who supported her can be petitioned by respondent to help her pay her remedy instruction. Further, the vast majority of taxpayers in both Ireland and Australia support women who commit crimes like this. You, the jury, have every right to call on the public purse to pay the remedy instructions, because if, quote, we the people, unquote, had not refused to extend to me the protection of the law for 5 years in the more than 99% majority, I would not have had to spend so much time and effort to gain my path to justice. I petitioned the jury to consider that the public purse is available to remedy these crimes because the public was absolutely complicit in condoning the crimes committed by the respondent. Okay? Yours sincerely, signed Peter Andrew Nolan, 2013-04-13, page 33, marked as original document. You see original document 2013-04-13, signed again. So this concludes the reading into evidence for the public and the jury of the notice to Jennifer Toal, final notice to Jennifer Toal, affidavit of accusation, dated 13th of April 2013. I will put some concluding remarks onto this video, and they are coming up next. Thank you very much for listening. Now, in conclusion, I just want to say to the jury, sum up my thoughts for the jury. You've just seen about 6 hours of video, and it is the details of a divorce that was conducted in both Ireland and Australia. You've seen how a woman committed perjury time and time again, how the government colluded with this perjury, how the government criminally victimized myself by doing things like closing my bank accounts, impoverishing me, threatening me, committing the crime of extortion, threatening to jail me if I didn't pay extortion money, stealing my house. You saw the arrogant criminal David Dunkley refuse to answer such questions as whether he is operating under oath today, refused time and time again my polite request to enter the court as long as all my inalienable rights were intact. You saw him say things like talk of inalienable rights, things that are written on the US Constitution called inanities. You can have no doubt, having watched this video, that your government is a criminal cartel. When you have magistrates and judges stealing from people, lying to people, arbitrarily sending 95% of assets to a woman who's known to be a perjurer based on her so-called testimony, you know that you have a problem. Okay? When you see this sort of thing, you know you have a problem. And when you see that I've been 5.5 years at this, presenting this information to a very wide audience, including up to about 3,200 politicians and media people all around the world. Nobody wants to talk about the criminality of the family courts. Okay? So everyone wants to say, oh, they're just unfair, they're just biased, and this is not true. They are a criminal cartel. So what we are doing at the Men's Business Association and the People's Courts of Australia and the People's Courts of Ireland is taking the due process of law back, the delegated responsibility of the due process of law back, and putting it in the hands of we the people. Because clearly our politicians have shown us that they are a bunch of criminals. Clearly our judges and our magistrates have shown us that they are a bunch of criminals. And we must take back the single most important process within any land in order to keep peace and harmony amongst the people, and that is the due process of law. You must not forget at any time that the agenda, the purpose of your government is to create conflict amongst the people. By creating conflict and dividing and conquering, they can gain control and more effectively oppress people. By having more crime, they need more police on the street, and that means more feet on the beat, more guns, more oppression. They're not there to protect you, they're there to generate and create crime while pretending that they're interested in stopping it. It is the same as the war on drugs and the war on poverty and all these so-called eternal wars that are going on. These eternal wars that are going on are run by the government, for the interest of the banksters and those who control the world. They're not interested in you. So here you have an opportunity. It's now time to, I guess, review any rebuttal from Jennifer and for the jury to deliberate amongst yourselves. What should you do? And that's a very difficult question for you to answer, but it's one you have to answer. What should you do? You have the opportunity of sending a message to the government, the legal fraternity, the women and the men who support women in these crimes against men. You have the opportunity to let all people know on the land of Australia that if you commit a crime, you will be held accountable before a jury of 12 honest men of honour and integrity. So I shall now let you retire to consider what it is that you will do with the information that has been presented to you. I wish you luck in your deliberations and your judgments. Thank you very much for listening.